The most significant long-term challenge we face as a country is the rise of China and the threat it poses to the post-World War II international order led by the United States. This has been made clear in a series of writings by the well-known and respected Harvard professor Graham Allison, beginning 2 years ago in 2015. In an article in the Atlantic magazine, he started to write about what he called the Thucydides trap. Professor Allison is set to publish a book this month on the same topic. And in the book, he writes that the defining question of global order for this generation is whether China and the United States can escape the Thucydides trap. I've had the privilege over the last few weeks of reviewing the book, and I believe it will be a must-read for those who care about the long-term security and economic interests of the United States. So what is he talking about? What is this issue? The Thucydides trap, and why has Professor Allison been so focused on writing about it and addressing it? Well, Thucydides is the famed Greek historian. Many actually view him as the father of all history, who wrote an epic historical work about the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. In that 30-year war, which devastated both of these Greek city-states, the rising power, Athens, challenged the established order of the ruling power, Sparta. The Thucydides trap is the term that Professor Allison describes when he talks about the strategic dilemma and danger that occurs when a rising power threatens a ruling power in the international system. And as his new book explores, in the last 500 years, when this has happened, because it does happen a lot in history, he reviews the last 500 years. Of the 16 times this has happened in the last 500 years, 12 of those times ended up having war, extensive war between the two countries. So that's not good. Those are not great odds. And indeed, in his Atlantic article, just 2 years ago, he concludes by saying, because of the seismic shifts and friction that is occurring between China and the U.S., war between these two countries is more likely than recognized at the moment. So that's not good news. But, Mr. President, there is some good news on this, because it's not just Harvard professors who are talking about this. It's not just Professor Allison who's talking about the Thucydides trap. So too are the Chinese. I, with a number of senators, had the opportunity a few years ago when President Xi Jinping visited the Senate to meet with him. And I came down to the Senate floor to talk about some of the issues, some of the ways we need to think about the long-term challenges with regard to the United States and China. And the article in the Atlantic had just come out. So I talked about it, the Thucydides trap, and how we need to avoid it. And then I literally walked into a meeting with the President of China and some other U.S. senators. And in his opening remarks, he talked about the Thucydides trap and how China and the United States need to avoid it. So that's the good news. At least on that issue, we're on the same sheet of paper.